You can't just give them back like a pair of shoes. That's what the social worker said, as Alice packed up the only two people who ever called her mom. Comment where you're listened from today, and take a breath. Enjoy the story. The sound of cardboard boxes hitting the hardwood floor echoed through the empty house like gunshots. Alice Carlton stood in the doorway of what had been Rachel and Jamal's bedroom for 3 years, watching the social worker pack the last of their belongings with mechanical efficiency. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Carlton?" The social worker's voice carried a hint of judgment that made Alice's stomach twist. "These children have been through enough transitions already." Alice's hands trembled as she gripped the doorframe. Rachel, now 8, sat on the stripped bed clutching her worn teddy bear, her dark eyes fixed on Alice with a mixture of confusion and hurt that would haunt Alice's dreams for years to come. 5-year-old Jamal pressed himself against his sister's side, thumb in his mouth, a habit he'd broken months ago but had suddenly returned to. "I can't do this anymore," Alice whispered, the words tasting like poison on her tongue. Not alone, not without Philip. The funeral had been only 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks since her husband's sudden heart attack had shattered not just her world, but the carefully constructed family they'd built together. Philip had been the one who'd pushed for the adoption. Philip had been the one who'd known instinctively how to braid Rachel's hair and help Jamal with his nightmares. Philip had been the bridge between Alice's privileged suburban world and the harsh reality these children had escaped from. Now, standing in the silence of their Westchester home, Alice felt like a fraud. A white woman who'd played house with 2 black children until real life got too hard. The thought made her sick, but she couldn't push it away. "Mama Alice?" Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper. She'd stopped calling her mom the day after the funeral, as if she somehow knew what was coming. "Are we going back to the system?" The question hit Alice like a physical blow. The system. That's what Rachel called the endless rotation of foster homes, group facilities, and temporary placements that had defined the first 5 years of her life before Philip and Alice had taken them in as godchildren, then begun the adoption process. "It's just temporary," Alice lied, hating herself for the deception. "Until I can figure things out." The social worker, Mrs. Lewis, gave Alice a look that said she'd heard this story too many times before. Children who got temporarily placed back into care rarely found their way out again, especially children of color, especially siblings who'd already been labeled as difficult to place. Jamal suddenly broke away from his sister and ran to Alice, wrapping his small arms around her legs. "Please don't send us away, Mama Alice. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good." Alice's resolve crumbled as she knelt down to his level, gathering both children into what would be their final embrace. Rachel remained stiff in her arms, already building the walls that would protect her from this latest abandonment. But Jamal clung to her desperately, his tears soaking through her shirt. "You are good, baby. Both of you are perfect. This isn't about you." "Then why?" Rachel's voice cut through Alice's explanation like a blade. At 8 years old, she'd already learned to see through adult lies. "Why are you giving us back?" Alice had no answer that wouldn't sound like an excuse. The truth was too complicated, too ugly to explain to children. The truth was that Philip's death had revealed how unprepared she was to be a single mother to 2 traumatized children. The truth was that she was drowning in her own grief and couldn't figure out how to save them all. "Because sometimes adults make mistakes," she said finally. "Sometimes we bite off more than we can chew." Rachel's expression hardened, aging her far beyond her 8 years. "We're not food, Alice. We're people." The use of her first name instead of any variation of mom felt like a slap. Alice watched as Rachel took Jamal's hand and led him toward the door, their small suitcases in tow. The little boy looked back once, hope still flickering in his eyes. "Will you visit us?" he asked. Alice opened her mouth to lie again, to make promises she knew she'd never keep. But Rachel squeezed his hand and answered for her. "No, Jay, she won't. Come on." As Mrs. Lewis's car pulled out of the driveway, Alice collapsed onto her front steps, finally allowing herself to cry. She told herself she was doing the right thing. Told herself the children deserved better than a broken woman who could barely get out of bed most days. Told herself they'd be adopted quickly by a loving family who could give them what she couldn't. She was wrong about almost everything. What Alice didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that this decision would haunt not just her, but Rachel and Jamal for the next 15 years. She didn't know that Rachel would spend every birthday hoping for a card that never came, or that Jamal would keep a school photo of their brief family tucked in his wallet through 3 more foster homes and 2 group facilities. And she certainly didn't know that 15 years later, when her own world was crashing down around her in ways she never could have imagined, she would need them more than she had ever needed anyone in her life. The phone call that would change everything was still 15 years away, but the seeds of that desperate moment were planted right here, on this sunny Tuesday afternoon, as Alice watched the only family she'd ever truly known disappear around the corner. Because sometimes the children we abandon grow up to become the only ones who can save us. 15 years had passed since that devastating Tuesday afternoon, and Rachel Donovan sat in her small apartment in Brooklyn, staring at the acceptance letter from Columbia Law School. The paper felt surreal in her hands, a golden ticket to a future she'd only dared to dream about during the darkest nights of her childhood. "You did it, sis." Jamal's voice carried pride and exhaustion in equal measure as he collapsed onto her second-hand couch, still wearing his hospital scrubs. At 20, he'd just finished his shift as a nursing assistant at Mount Sinai, working nights to pay for his pre-med classes during the day. Rachel folded the letter carefully and placed it on the coffee table they'd found on the street and refinished together. We did it. Both of us. The road from that painful day in Westchester to this moment had been anything but smooth. After Mrs. Lewis's car had pulled away from Alice's house, Rachel and Jamal had been placed in separate temporary homes, a decision that had nearly destroyed them both. Rachel had been sent to the Rodriguez family in Queens, while Jamal went to a group home in the Bronx. "I remember the first time they split us up," Rachel said, her fingers tracing the edge of the letter. "I was so angry. I thought if I could just be perfect, they'd keep us together." Jamal nodded, his eyes distant. "I cried every night for 2 months. Mrs. Patterson, remember her? She kept telling me I was too old to cry, that I needed to man up. I was 5 years old." The Rodriguez family had been kind enough, but Rachel had been a ghost of herself, silent, withdrawn, convinced that love was just a temporary arrangement that ended when things got difficult. She'd watched Mrs. Rodriguez's own children get help with homework, receive birthday parties, and enjoy the casual affection of parents who weren't worried about paperwork and monthly visits from social workers. For Jamal, the group home had been worse. Overcrowded, understaffed, and filled with children who'd learned that survival meant looking out for yourself first. He'd lost weight, started having nightmares again, and had begun to stutter, a problem he'd never had before. "The day I got moved to the Jones family," Jamal continued, "I thought it was another temporary stop. I'd been in 4 different places in 8 months. I was so angry at the world, at Philip for dying, at Alice for giving up on us." Rachel remembered that anger. It had lived in her chest like a burning coal for years, fueling her determination to never depend on anyone again. She'd thrown herself into her studies with fierce intensity, earning straight A's not out of love of learning, but out of spite. She would show everyone, especially Alice, that she could succeed without help. "At least the Jonases kept us together," Rachel said softly. That changed everything. Grant and Gina Jones had been in their 40s when they decided to become foster parents. They'd been unable to have children of their own, and something about Rachel and Jamal's file had touched them. Maybe it was the note about how the siblings had been separated and were struggling apart. Maybe it was the social worker's comment that they were good kids who'd been through a lot. "Mrs. Jones cried when she saw us," Jamal remembered. 2 angry, broken kids who barely spoke to each other anymore. "Remember how we used to fight those first few months? I blamed you for not protecting me when they split us up." Rachel's throat tightened. "And I blamed you for being weak, for crying, for making them think we were too much trouble. I was 13 and thought I could control everything if I was just strong enough." The Jones had been patient in ways Rachel hadn't thought possible. When she'd screamed at them during her first breakdown, accusing them of planning to give her away too, Mr. Jones had simply sat with her until she'd cried herself out. When Jamal had refused to eat for 3 days, convinced the food would run out, Mrs. Jones had quietly packed extra lunches and left them where he could find them. "They never promised us forever," Rachel said. "That's what made it work. They just promised us today, and then tomorrow, and then the next day." "Smart people," Jamal agreed. "They knew we couldn't handle forever, not after Alice." The Jonas had been the first adults to acknowledge what had happened to them. Not just the original trauma that had put them in the system, but the trauma of being abandoned by the woman who'd promised to be their mother. They'd gotten both children into therapy, fought for them to stay in good schools, and most importantly, they'd never made them feel like they were charity cases. Rachel had been 16 when she'd first asked Mrs. Jones why they'd taken them in. Because every child deserves someone who believes in them, had been the simple answer. And because you two were so determined to take care of each other, we thought you might let us help. The Jonas had legally adopted them when Rachel was 17 and Jamal was 14. It had been a quiet ceremony at the courthouse, followed by pizza and ice cream at home. No fanfare, no big celebration, just the quiet acknowledgement that they were family now, officially and permanently. I still have the picture from that day, Jamal said, pulling out his phone. Look at us. We look so serious. Rachel smiled at the image. 4 people standing in front of a courthouse, all of them a little overwhelmed by the significance of the moment. Mr. Jones had his arm around Jamal's shoulders, while Mrs. Jones stood next to Rachel, not touching but close enough to offer comfort if needed. We still couldn't believe it was real, Rachel remembered. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for them to change their minds. It took years before I stopped having nightmares about going back to the group home, Jamal admitted. Even now, sometimes I wake up in panic, thinking this is all a dream, but it hadn't been a dream. The Jones had put both children through school, attended every graduation, every award ceremony, every milestone. They'd celebrated when Rachel got into college on a full scholarship, and they'd been there when Jamal had struggled through his first year of community college before finding his calling in healthcare. Remember when I told them I wanted to be a nurse? Jamal laughed. Dad was so confused. He kept asking if I was sure I didn't want to be a doctor. It took me forever to explain that I wanted to be the person who holds hands with scared kids in the hospital. Rachel understood. Jamal had found his purpose in caring for others, in being the gentle presence he'd needed when he was small and afraid. She, on the other hand, had chosen law because she wanted to fight for children who couldn't fight for themselves. We turned out okay, she said, though the words felt strange. For so long, she'd been afraid to say them out loud, as if admitting success might jinx it. More than okay, Jamal corrected. We're actually happy. When's the last time you thought about Alice? The question caught Rachel off guard. The truth was, she thought about Alice Carlton more often than she cared to admit, especially during major life events, graduation, her first job, the day she'd gotten the LSAT scores that would open doors to law school. She'd wondered if Alice ever thought about them, if she ever regretted her choice, if she'd kept any of the pictures from their 3 years together. I looked her up online a few months ago, Rachel admitted quietly. She still lives in the same house in Westchester. She never remarried, never had other children. She works at some nonprofit now, something about childhood literacy. Jamal was quiet for a moment. Do you think she's happy? I don't know. Part of me hopes she is, and part of me hopes she isn't. Is that terrible? It's honest, Jamal said. I used to fantasize about running into her somewhere, about her seeing how well we turned out despite her giving up on us. I wanted her to feel guilty. And now? Jamal shrugged. Now I mostly feel sorry for her. She missed out on watching us grow up. She missed out on being proud of us. That's her loss. Rachel nodded, but something in her chest still ached when she thought about Alice. The woman who'd read her bedtime stories and taught her to ride a bike. The woman who'd promised to love her forever, and then broken that promise when it got hard. We should celebrate, Jamal said, changing the subject. Law school, Rachel. You're going to be a lawyer. As they sat there planning their small celebration, neither of them could have imagined that in just 3 weeks, Rachel's phone would ring with a call that would shatter their carefully constructed peace. A call that would force them to confront the past they'd worked so hard to overcome. The voice on the other end would be desperate, broken, and achingly familiar. Rachel, it's Alice. I know I have no right to call, but I need your help. I'm in trouble, and you and Jamal are the only ones who can save me. The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday night, jolting Rachel from her sleep. She'd been dreaming about her first day of law school, about walking into those imposing halls at Columbia, when the shrill sound cut through her subconscious. For a moment she considered letting it go to voicemail. Nothing good ever came from calls this late. But something made her reach for it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the fact that Jamal was working a double shift at the hospital, and late-night calls always made her worry about his safety on the subway home. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code made her stomach drop. 914, Westchester County. Hello? Her voice came out rougher than she intended. Rachel! The voice on the other end was barely a whisper, but Rachel would have recognized it anywhere. 15 years of silence hadn't erased the sound of the woman who'd once sung her lullabies. It's Alice. Alice Carlton. Rachel's hand tightened on the phone, her body going rigid. For a moment, she couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The careful walls she'd built around that part of her past suddenly felt as fragile as paper. I know I have no right to call, Alice continued, her words tumbling over each other. I know what I did was unforgivable. But Rachel, I'm in trouble. Real trouble. And you and Jamal, you're the only ones who can help me. Are you serious right now? Rachel's voice was ice cold, the lawyer in her taking over to protect the wounded child beneath. You call me after 15 years of nothing and you want help? Rachel, please, just listen to me. I'm going to lose everything. My house, my job, my freedom. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, and now I'm paying for it. But innocent people are going to get hurt if I can't fix this. Rachel stood up, pacing her small bedroom. What kind of mistake? Alice's breathing was ragged on the other end. I embezzled money from the Literacy Foundation where I work. It wasn't supposed to happen. I was just borrowing it, trying to help someone, and then I couldn't pay it back, and I took more, and now… How much? Rachel's question was sharp, professional. $87,000. Rachel closed her eyes. It was a significant amount, but not insurmountable. Certainly not enough to destroy someone's life unless there were other factors at play. Who were you trying to help? She asked, already knowing the answer would complicate everything. Alice's sob came through the phone clearly. Philip's mother. She has Alzheimer's, Rachel. She's been in a care facility for 3 years, and her insurance wouldn't cover the specialized program she needed. I couldn't just let her waste away in some state-run place where they don't care about her. Philip loved her so much, and after everything I took from him by giving you children away. The admission hit Rachel like a physical blow. Alice had been carrying guilt about them all these years. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it explained the desperation Rachel could hear in her voice. So you stole money to pay for her care. I told myself I'd pay it back. I've been putting every penny of my salary toward it for 2 years, but it's not enough. The board found out last week. They're filing charges tomorrow, unless I can make full restitution by Monday. That's 4 days, Rachel. 4 days to come up with $87,000, or I go to prison. Rachel sank back onto her bed, her mind racing. Why are you calling me? Why not a lawyer or a bank or… I've tried everything. No one will loan me money without collateral, and I've already mortgaged everything I own. The only asset I have left is the house, but it would take months to sell, and I don't have months. I have days. That still doesn't explain why you're calling me. Alice's silence stretched long enough that Rachel thought the call had dropped. When she spoke again, her voice was small, broken. Because you're successful. I've been following your careers, both of you. I know about Columbia, about Jamal's work at the hospital. I know you both turned out to be everything Philip and I believed you could be, despite what I did to you. And because you're the only family I have left. The audacity of it stole Rachel's breath. Family. You gave us back like we were library books, Alice. You don't get to call us family now. I know what I did was unforgivable. But Rachel, if I go to prison, it won't just be me who suffers. Philip's mother will be moved to a state facility where she'll die confused and alone. The foundation will collapse. We provide reading programs to over 3,000 kids in underserved communities. All those children will lose their after-school programs, their tutoring, their safe spaces. Rachel hated that Alice was smart enough to appeal to her sense of justice, to the part of her that had chosen law precisely because she wanted to protect vulnerable people. And there's something else, Alice continued. Something I should have told you years ago, but I was too ashamed. What? When you and Jamal were placed back in care, I set up trust funds for both of you. I put $50,000 in each account, meant for when you turned 18. I wanted to make sure you had something for college, for your futures. Rachel's blood ran cold. We never received any money. I know. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The social worker who was supposed to manage the funds, she embezzled the money. By the time I found out, she'd disappeared, and the agency said there was nothing they could do. I tried to fight it, tried to get you the money you were owed, but I had no legal standing anymore. I wasn't your guardian. The room felt like it was spinning. Rachel and Jamal had struggled through college, taking on debt, working multiple jobs, scraping by on scholarships and grants, all while money that was supposed to be theirs had been stolen by someone else. You're telling me this now, after 15 years? I tried to find ways to help you both without revealing who I was. Anonymous scholarships, donations to programs I knew you were in, but it was never enough to make up for what was taken from you. Rachel's hands were shaking. I need to call Jamal. I need to think about this. Rachel, wait. There's one more thing. The reason I really called you specifically. What? You're going to be a lawyer. You understand the legal system in ways I don't. I'm not just asking for money, I'm asking for help figuring out how to make this right for everyone. The foundation, Philip's mother, the children who depend on our programs. I need someone smart enough to find a solution that saves everyone, not just me. Rachel closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices settling on her shoulders. The rational part of her mind was screaming to hang up, to block Alice's number, to pretend this conversation had never happened. But another part, the part that had become a lawyer to fight for justice, was already working through the problem. I'm not promising anything, she said finally, but I'll talk to Jamal. We'll discuss it. Thank you. Rachel, I know I don't deserve. You don't. And Alice, this doesn't make us family. This doesn't erase what you did to us. If we help you, it's not because we've forgiven you. It's because innocent people will suffer if we don't. I understand. Rachel hung up without saying goodbye and immediately called Jamal. He answered on the first ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. Rachel, what's wrong? We need to talk. Can you come over? Now? I'm already in a cab. Had a feeling something was off when I saw you tried to call earlier. What happened? Rachel took a deep breath, staring at her law school acceptance letter still sitting on the coffee table. Alice called. She's in trouble, and she wants our help. Jamal's sharp intake of breath was audible through the phone. What kind of trouble? The kind that could send her to prison. And Jamal? She told me about money that was supposed to be ours. $100,000 that got stolen while we were in foster care. What are you talking about? Just get here. We have a lot to discuss and very little time to decide what we're going to do. As Rachel waited for her brother, she found herself thinking about the scared 5-year-old boy who'd clung to her legs, begging not to be sent away, and about the woman who'd promised to love them forever and then broken that promise when love got complicated. Now that same woman was asking for their help, and Rachel had to decide whether justice meant walking away or stepping forward into a situation that could destroy everything they'd built. The irony wasn't lost on her. The children Alice had abandoned when they needed her most were now the only ones who could save her when she needed them most. But at what cost to themselves? Jamal arrived at Rachel's apartment at 1:30 a.m., still in his scrubs, his face etched with exhaustion and disbelief. Rachel had made coffee. Strong, bitter coffee that matched the taste in her mouth since Alice's call. They sat across from each other at her small kitchen table, the weight of 15 years and one impossible decision hanging between them. Tell me everything, Jamal said, his voice steady but strained. Every word, she said. Rachel repeated the conversation verbatim, watching her brother's expression shift from shock to anger, to something that looked disturbingly like understanding. When she finished, Jamal was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee cup. The trust funds, he said finally. Do you think she's telling the truth about that? I don't know, but it would explain some things. Remember how confused the Jones were when we told them we didn't have any money set aside for college? They kept saying most foster kids had some kind of fund, even if it was small. Jamal nodded slowly. And remember that social worker, Ms. Reynolds? The one who disappeared right before we went to live with the Jones? Mrs. Lewis mentioned she'd left the agency suddenly. Something about personal issues. Rachel felt sick. They'd struggled so hard, worked so many jobs, taken on so much debt, all while money that rightfully belonged to them had been stolen by someone they'd trusted to protect them. Even if that's true, Rachel said, it doesn't change what Alice did to us. No, it doesn't. Jamal rubbed his eyes. But Rachel, she's going to prison. Real prison. And those kids she mentioned, 3,000 kids who'll lose their programs. That's not Alice's fault. That's just collateral damage. Rachel hated that he was right. She'd spent years in law school studying cases exactly like this, where one person's mistakes created ripple effects that hurt innocent people. The children in those literacy programs hadn't done anything wrong. Neither had Philip's mother, alone in her confusion and fading memories. So what are you saying? We should help her? I'm saying we should see her, face to face, make our own judgment about whether she's telling the truth. The thought of seeing Alice again made Rachel's chest tight. I don't think I can do that. Jamal reached across the table and took her hand. Yes, you can. We both can. We're not scared kids anymore, Rachel. We're adults who survived everything the system threw at us. We're stronger than our worst memories. What if seeing her brings it all back? What if... Then we deal with it. Together. Like we always have. Rachel looked at her brother. Really looked at him. At 20, he'd grown into a man who chose to spend his days caring for people in their most vulnerable moments. He'd taken the worst parts of their childhood and transformed them into compassion. Maybe he was right. Maybe they were strong enough for this. If we do this, she said slowly, we do it on our terms. We meet her somewhere public. We don't go to that house. Agreed. And Rachel, if we decide to help her, it's not about forgiveness. It's about doing what's right for everyone else involved. 2 hours later, Rachel found herself dialing Alice's number. It rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. Hello? It's Rachel. Jamal and I will meet with you. Today, 2 p.m. at the Starbucks on Main Street in White Plains. Come alone. Rachel, Yes or no, Alice? That's the only choice you get. Yes. I'll be there. Rachel hung up and immediately regretted the decision. But Jamal was right. They needed to see her, to judge for themselves whether this was genuine desperation or elaborate manipulation. The drive to Westchester felt surreal. Rachel gripped the steering wheel while Jamal navigated from the passenger seat, both of them silent as familiar landmarks came into view. The exit for their old elementary school. The shopping center where Alice used to take them for ice cream. The park where Philip had taught Jamal to throw a baseball. You okay? Jamal asked as they pulled into the Starbucks parking lot. No, but let's do this anyway. They arrived 10 minutes early and chose a table near the back, where they could see the entire cafe. Rachel ordered a latte she didn't want while Jamal got hot chocolate, a childhood habit he'd never outgrown. They sat in tense silence watching the door. At exactly 2 p.m., Alice walked in. Rachel's breath caught. The woman who'd haunted her memories for 15 years looked smaller somehow. Older, obviously, but also diminished in ways that had nothing to do with age. Her blonde hair was streaked with gray and pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, and her eyes, those blue eyes that Rachel remembered laughing at Philip's jokes, were rimmed with exhaustion and something that looked like shame. Alice spotted them immediately and froze. For a moment, Rachel thought she might turn around and leave. Instead, she walked slowly toward their table, her hands trembling slightly. Rachel, Jamal. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You look wonderful. Neither sibling stood or offered any gesture of greeting. Rachel studied Alice's face, looking for signs of deception, manipulation, anything that would make this decision easier. What she saw instead was a broken woman who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Sit down, Rachel said curtly. Alice sat, placing her hands flat on the table as if to stop them from shaking. I can't tell you how grateful I am that you agreed to see me. I know what this must cost you. You don't know anything about what this costs us, Jamal said quietly. You gave up the right to know anything about us 15 years ago. Alice flinched but nodded. You're right. You're absolutely right. I need you to understand that I never stopped thinking about you. I never stopped regretting what I did. But you never called, Rachel pointed out. Never wrote. Never tried to find out if we were okay. Because I thought it would be selfish. I thought you were better off without me. I convinced myself that reaching out would only hurt you more. That wasn't your choice to make, Jamal said, his voice hard. We deserved the chance to decide for ourselves whether we wanted contact. Tears were rolling down Alice's face now, but she didn't try to wipe them away. I know. I made the wrong choice about everything. I was drowning in grief, and I couldn't see past my own pain to what you needed from me. Rachel leaned back in her chair, maintaining emotional distance. Tell us about the money, the trust funds. Alice reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. I brought everything I could find. Bank statements, correspondence with the agency, police reports about Ms. Reynolds. She spread the papers across the table. Rachel and Jamal leaned forward, studying documents that confirmed their worst fears. $50,000 each, deposited into accounts managed by the Social Services Agency. Regular withdrawals starting 6 months after their placement, all authorized by someone named Jennifer Reynolds. She was supposed to use the money for your care, for things the Jonases couldn't afford, Alice explained. School supplies, extracurricular activities, college prep courses. Instead, she was stealing from multiple accounts. By the time the agency discovered it, she'd taken over $400,000 from various foster children and disappeared. 400,000, Jamal repeated softly. How many kids did she steal from? 12 that they know of. Maybe more. The agency said they'd try to recover the funds, but Alice shrugged helplessly. Most of it was gone. She'd spent it on gambling debts. Rachel felt sick. 12 children, all of them already damaged by the system, robbed of money that was meant to give them a chance at better futures. Why didn't you tell us when we turned 18? She asked. Because what good would it have done? The money was gone. All it would have accomplished was making you angrier at a world that had already hurt you enough. I thought I could find other ways to help you instead. What other ways? Alice pulled out another set of papers. Anonymous scholarships. I donated to every program I could find that you were involved in. When Jamal needed money for his EMT certification, I made sure the training program had emergency funds available. When you were applying to colleges, Rachel, I donated to scholarship funds specifically for foster children. Rachel stared at the donation records. Tens of thousands of dollars over the years, all carefully documented but never traced back to Alice's name. You've been watching us, she said. Not watching, just making sure you were okay, making sure you had opportunities. It was the least I could do. The least you could have done, Jamal said sharply, was not abandon us in the first place. Alice's composure finally cracked completely. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing openly. I know I destroyed everything. I was supposed to protect you, and instead I hurt you worse than anyone ever had. I've lived with that guilt every single day for 15 years. Rachel found herself unmoved by the tears. She'd cried too many tears of her own over this woman to be swayed by Alice's pain now. Tell us about Philip's mother, she said. Alice wiped her eyes and tried to compose herself. Sheila. She's 83 now. The Alzheimer's started about 5 years ago, but it's gotten much worse. The facility she was in, they treated her like a problem to be managed, not a person. She was wasting away, Rachel. I couldn't bear it. So you stole money to move her somewhere better. I borrowed it. I fully intended to pay it back. But the specialized care costs $12,000 a month, and I only make $60,000 a year. I kept taking more, telling myself I'd find a way to replace it, but you couldn't, Jamal finished. No, and now they've discovered everything. The board is filing charges Monday unless I can make full restitution. $87,000 by 5 p.m. Monday, or I go to prison. Rachel looked at her brother. In his eyes, she saw the same war she was fighting, between the hurt child who wanted Alice to pay for her crimes and the adult who understood that justice was more complicated than revenge. If we help you, Rachel said slowly, what guarantee do we have that you won't do something like this again? None, Alice said simply. You have no reason to trust me, but I'm not asking for trust. I'm asking for mercy. For Sheila, for the children who depend on the foundation, for the community that would lose their programs. And what do you want from us exactly? Alice took a shaky breath. I need a loan. I'll sign over the deed to my house as collateral. It's worth about $200,000, so you'd be protected. I just need time to sell it properly, to get enough money to pay you back and maybe start over somewhere else. Rachel felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. It wasn't just about money. It was about choosing what kind of people they wanted to be. The kind who turned their backs on someone in crisis, or the kind who chose mercy even when it wasn't deserved. But as she looked at Alice, really looked at her, Rachel realized there was something else at stake here. Something Alice hadn't said, but that hung in the air between them like a confession. You're dying, she said suddenly. Alice's eyes went wide. What? You're sick. That's why you really called us. It's not just about the money or the foundation. You're dying, and you couldn't bear the thought of dying without trying to make things right with us. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Alice nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to her chest. Breast cancer, stage 3. I started treatment 6 months ago, but the prognosis isn't good. Maybe a year, maybe 2 if I'm lucky. And there it was, the truth that changed everything. The Starbucks around them buzzed with normal life. Students typing on laptops, mothers chatting over coffee, business people checking their phones, while Rachel, Jamal, and Alice sat frozen in a bubble of devastating revelation. Cancer. The word hung in the air like a death sentence, which Rachel realized with a bitter irony. It literally was. "How long have you known?" Jamal asked, his voice shifting into the gentle tone he used with his most vulnerable patients. Alice's laugh was hollow. "I found the lump right after I started taking money from the foundation. Isn't that perfect timing? I finally work up the courage to help Sheila, to do something Philip would have been proud of, and then I find out I'm dying anyway." "That's not why you did it," Rachel said, her lawyer's instincts cutting through the emotion. "You didn't steal money because you were dying. You're telling us you're dying because you got caught stealing." Alice's face crumpled. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm so used to justifying everything, to making excuses. The truth is, I took the money because I couldn't stand watching Sheila fade away in that horrible place. The cancer just makes it all feel more urgent, more final." Rachel studied Alice's face, looking for manipulation, for the careful construction of sympathy that defendants often used in court. But what she saw was exhaustion so profound, it seemed to radiate from Alice's bones. "Why didn't you tell us about the cancer when you called last night?" Jamal asked. "Because I didn't want your pity. I don't know what I wanted. Maybe just to know that you were both okay before I die. Maybe to tell you that I'm sorry, that not a day has gone by when I haven't regretted what I did." "But you still want our help with the money," Rachel pointed out. "Yes, because even if I'm dying, Sheila isn't. She deserves better than dying confused and alone in some state facility. And those kids, the 3,000 children who depend on our programs, they don't deserve to lose everything because I made terrible choices." Rachel felt the familiar weight of injustice settling on her shoulders. It was the same feeling that had driven her to law school, the same rage at systems that punish the innocent along with the guilty. She hated that Alice was right about the collateral damage. "We need time to think," Jamal said. "This isn't a decision we can make sitting in a coffee shop." Alice nodded, gathering her papers with shaking hands. "I understand. But Rachel, Jamal, I need you to know that whether you help me or not, I'm proud of who you've become. Philip would be so proud. You turned out to be everything we hoped for, despite what I did to you." "Don't," Rachel said sharply. "Don't you dare act like you had anything to do with who we became. We succeeded in spite of you, not because of you." "You're right. I'm sorry." They watched Alice leave, her shoulders bent under the weight of her secrets and her diagnosis. Rachel felt emotionally drained, as if the last hour had aged her years. "We need to go home," she said to Jamal. "We need to process this." The drive back to Brooklyn was silent, both siblings lost in their own thoughts. It wasn't until they were back in Rachel's apartment that the full impact of the afternoon hit them. "She's dying," Jamal said, collapsing onto the couch. "The woman who broke our hearts is dying, and she wants our help to save everyone else." Rachel poured herself a glass of wine, even though it was only 4 p.m. "Do you think she's telling the truth about the cancer?" "Yeah, I do. You can't fake that kind of exhaustion, that pallor. She's sick, Rachel, really sick." Rachel joined him on the couch, curling her legs under her. "So what do we do?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to walk away, to let her face the consequences of her choices. But another part of me keeps thinking about all those kids who'll lose their after-school programs. And Philip's mother, Sheila." "Yeah." Jamal was quiet for a moment. "You know what's really messed up? I think I understand why Alice gave us away now." Rachel looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "She was overwhelmed. Philip died, and suddenly she was alone with 2 traumatized kids, and she didn't know how to handle it. She panicked and made the worst possible choice, but it came from fear, not malice. Understanding doesn't equal forgiveness, Jamal. No, it doesn't. But it helps explain why she spent 15 years trying to make amends in her own twisted way. All those anonymous donations, all that money she spent trying to help us from a distance." Rachel took a long sip of wine, feeling it burned slightly on the way down. "I looked up the foundation online while we were driving back. It's legitimate. They really do serve 3,000 kids. Low-income families, mostly. Reading programs, homework help, safe spaces after school. And if it collapses, those kids go back to empty apartments, to streets, to whatever they can find. Some of them will be fine. Others..." Rachel shrugged. Others won't. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of other people's futures pressing down on them. Finally, Jamal spoke. What does your gut tell you? Rachel closed her eyes, trying to separate her emotions from her instincts. My gut tells me she's telling the truth. About the cancer, about the money, about Sheila, about everything. My gut also tells me that helping her doesn't make us weak or stupid. It makes us better than our worst impulses. Mine too. But Jamal, if we do this, we need to be smart about it. We need protections, guarantees, legal safeguards. This isn't about trust, it's about justice. Jamal nodded. What are you thinking? Rachel pulled out her laptop and started typing. I'm thinking we call the Jones. We tell them everything and ask for their advice. Then we call our bank and see about getting a loan against my law school fund and your savings. Then we call a lawyer, not me, someone with experience in financial crimes, and we set up a deal that protects everyone. You want to use your law school money? It's $87,000, Jamal. Between my savings and yours, we can cover it. And with the house as collateral, we'll get it back when she sells. And if she dies before she can sell, Rachel had already thought of that. Then we inherit a house worth twice what we loaned her, and we use the profit to set up a scholarship fund for foster kids. Either way, some good comes from this mess. Jamal stared at her. You've already decided, haven't you? I think we both have. We're going to help her. Not because she deserves it, but because everyone else caught in this situation does deserve better. There's something else, Jamal said quietly. If we do this, if we help her, what happens after? Do we walk away again? Or do we try to build some kind of relationship with her before she dies? It was the question Rachel had been avoiding. I don't know if I can forgive her, Jamal. I don't know if I want to. I'm not talking about forgiveness. I'm talking about closure, about not having regrets when she's gone. Rachel thought about the scared 8-year-old who'd watched Alice drive away, who'd spent years wondering if she'd done something wrong, if she'd been too difficult to love. That little girl deserved answers, deserved the chance to say everything she'd held inside for 15 years. Maybe, she said finally, maybe we try. 2 hours later, they'd called the Jones, explained the situation, and received the wise counsel they'd hoped for. Gina Jones had cried when they told her about the stolen trust funds, and Grant had offered to help them navigate the legal complexities of Alice's situation. You don't have to do this, Gina had said. No one would blame you for walking away. But we'd blame ourselves, Rachel had replied. We'd wonder for the rest of our lives if we could have saved those kids' programs, if we could have helped Sheila, if we could have found peace with Alice before it was too late. By evening, they'd secured a loan, contacted a lawyer, and drafted the terms of their offer. Rachel called Alice at 8 p.m. It's Rachel. We'll help you, but with conditions. Alice's sob of relief was audible through the phone. Thank you so much. What conditions? You sign over the deed to your house as collateral. You submit to regular financial monitoring. You resign from the foundation board immediately and agree to stay away from any financial decisions. And Alice? Yes? If you ever lie to us again about anything, the deal is off, and we'll make sure you serve every day of whatever sentence they give you. I understand. Rachel, we'll meet you at the lawyer's office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Come prepared to sign everything. After she hung up, Rachel found Jamal standing at her window, looking out at the Brooklyn skyline. Any regrets? She asked. Ask me in a year, he said, when we know how this all turns out. But even as he said it, Rachel could see something in his posture that looked like relief. They'd made their choice. They'd chosen justice over revenge, mercy over bitterness. It didn't erase the past, but maybe it would help them build a better future. What none of them could have predicted was that helping Alice would uncover secrets that went far deeper than embezzled money or hidden cancer diagnoses. Secrets that would challenge everything they thought they knew about their abandonment, about Philip's death, and about the real reason Alice had given them away 15 years ago. The truth, when it finally emerged, would be more devastating than anything they'd already discovered. The lawyer's office in White Plains was sterile and cold, all glass and chrome that reflected the fluorescent lights harshly. Rachel sat next to Jamal, both of them reviewing the final paperwork that would transfer $87,000 to Alice and save her from prison. Across the conference table, Alice looked smaller than ever, her signature shaking as she signed document after document. And that's everything, Attorney Morrison said, gathering the papers. Mrs. Carlton, The funds will be transferred to the Foundation's account within the hour. You should contact the board immediately to arrange payment. Alice nodded, her relief palpable. Thank you, all of you. I know I don't deserve this kindness. Rachel remained silent, but Jamal leaned forward slightly. Alice, there's something we need to ask you. Something that's been bothering us since yesterday. Alice's hand stilled on her purse. What is it? When you gave us away, Jamal said carefully. You told everyone it was because you couldn't handle being a single mother to two traumatized kids. But that wasn't the whole truth, was it? The color drained from Alice's face. Rachel felt her stomach clench. There was more. Even now, even after everything, there were still secrets. I don't know what you mean, Alice whispered. Rachel's lawyer instincts kicked in. Alice, we've just given you nearly $90,000 and saved you from prison. The least you can give us in return is the complete truth about why you abandoned us. Alice looked around the conference room as if seeking an escape route. Finally, her shoulders sagged in defeat. You're right, there was more. But telling you won't change anything now. It'll only hurt you both more. Let us decide that, Rachel said firmly. We're not children anymore. We can handle the truth. Alice closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they were filled with a pain so deep it seemed to emanate from her soul. The night before I called Mrs. Lewis to come get you, she began, her voice barely audible. I found something in Philip's study, something I wasn't supposed to see. Rachel and Jamal exchanged glances. Philip had been dead for 6 weeks when Alice gave them away. What could she have found that would change her mind about keeping them? Philip had been planning to leave me, Alice continued, each word seeming to cut her throat. I found papers from a divorce lawyer, custody agreements already drawn up. He was going to take you both and file for divorce. The words hit Rachel like a physical blow. Philip, the man she'd adored, who'd read her bedtime stories and taught her to ride a bike, had been planning to leave Alice for them. That's impossible, Jamal said. Philip loved you. We all saw it. He did love me, but he loved you more. Alice's voice cracked. The papers were dated a week before his heart attack. He'd already put down deposits on a house closer to your schools, had researched child psychologists, had even looked into support groups for single fathers. Rachel felt the room spinning. Why? Why would he leave you for us? Alice laughed bitterly. Because I was failing. Because every time you had a nightmare, Jamal, I froze up instead of comforting you. Because every time you asked me a hard question about your past, Rachel, I changed the subject instead of helping you process it. Philip saw what I was too proud to admit. I wasn't cut out to be your mother. But you were trying, Jamal protested. You were learning. I was pretending. And Philip could see right through it. He knew you deserved better than someone who was just going through the motions. Rachel's mind raced through memories, re-examining every interaction with Philip through this new lens. His extra patience when Alice seemed overwhelmed. The way he'd step in when she fumbled with their emotional needs. The quiet conversations she'd overheard between her adoptive parents late at night. The custody papers said he was planning to tell me after the adoption was finalized, Alice continued. He wanted to make sure you were legally protected first. He was going to give me the choice to be involved in your lives or not, but either way, he was going to be your primary parent. And then he died, Rachel said softly. And then he died, and I was left alone with 2 children who needed more than I could give them, and the knowledge that the man I loved had been planning to leave me because I wasn't good enough for you. The silence in the conference room was deafening. Attorney Morrison had the good sense to busy himself with paperwork, pretending not to hear the family drama unfolding at his conference table. So you gave us away, Jamal said, because you thought that's what Philip would have wanted. I gave you away because I knew it was what you needed. Philip was right. You deserved better than a woman who was just trying to fill a role she was never meant for. I convinced myself that letting you go was the most loving thing I could do. Rachel felt 15 years of anger shifting, rearranging itself into something more complex. But you never told us. You let us think we weren't wanted, that we were too much trouble, because the truth would have been worse. How do you tell 2 children that their beloved father was planning to leave his wife because of them? How do you make them carry that guilt? So instead you made us carry the guilt of abandonment, Rachel said, her voice hard. You made us believe we were unlovable. Alice's tears were flowing freely now. I know. I made the wrong choice. I thought protecting you from the truth about Philip was more important than protecting you from feeling unwanted. I was wrong about everything. Jamal leaned back in his chair, processing this revelation. Did Philip ever say anything to you directly, about feeling like you weren't connecting with us? Once. About a month before he died, he suggested we all go to family therapy. He said he thought we needed help learning to be a family together. I got defensive, told him we were fine, that we just needed more time. Alice wiped her eyes. The next week, he made his first appointment with the divorce lawyer. Rachel felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for the father she'd lost too soon, who'd been planning to fight for them. Relief that they had been wanted, deeply and completely, by at least one parent. There's something else, Alice said quietly. Something I found with the custody papers. She reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. Rachel's name was written on the front in Philip's familiar handwriting. He wrote letters, one for each of you, to be given to you when you turned 18. I never gave them to you because, she shrugged helplessly, because I was a coward. Rachel stared at the envelope as if it might explode. 15 years late, but here was a message from the father who'd loved her enough to plan his entire future around keeping her safe. With trembling hands, she opened it. My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and Alice has finally found the courage to give you this letter. I hope by now you understand that everything I did was because I love you more than my own life. I know Alice struggled to connect with you and Jamal in the way you needed. That doesn't make her a bad person. It just makes her human. Some people are natural parents and others have to work harder at it. Alice falls into the second category, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. I've made arrangements to ensure you and Jamal stay together no matter what happens to me. I've also set aside money for your futures and made sure you'll have the support you need to heal from everything you've been through. Rachel, you have a brilliant mind and a fierce heart. Use both to make the world better for children like you and Jamal. Don't let anger make you bitter. Channel it into justice instead.
Will love you forever, even from wherever. Dad Rachel's vision blurred as she finished reading. Jamal was opening his own letter, tears already streaming down his face. Alice sat finally having shared the burden she'd carried alone for 15 years. He knew Alice wasn't ready, but he also knew she'd her own way. And he made sure we'd be taken care of no matter what happened. Jamal, looking up.
The trust funds, the arrangements, he had it all planned. Alice nodded. He was protecting all of us, even me. The divorce papers included provisions for my financial security, too. He wasn't trying to destroy me. He was trying to save our family by rearranging it. Rachel looked at Alice with new eyes, still the woman who'd abandoned them, but now also the woman who'd been drowning in grief and inadequacy, who'd made impossible choices in impossible circumstances. I'm not going to tell you that this makes everything okay, Rachel said carefully. 15 years of believing we weren't wanted can't be erased by one conversation. I know, but it helps. It helps to know that Philip was fighting for us, and it helps to understand why you made the choices you did, even if they were the wrong choices. Alice looked up hopefully. Does this mean, could we maybe try to know each other again? Before, she gestured vaguely at her body, at the cancer eating away at her time. Rachel and Jamal looked at each other, having one of their wordless conversations. Finally, Jamal spoke. We can try, not as mother and children, that ship has sailed, but maybe as people who shared Philip's love and are trying to figure out how to honor his memory. I'd like that, Alice whispered. As they left the lawyer's office, Rachel felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years. Peace with her past. Not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding. The knowledge that sometimes people make terrible choices for reasons that are more complex than simple selfishness or cruelty. 6 months later, Rachel started her first year of law school with a renewed sense of purpose. Jamal continued his nursing career, specializing in pediatric care, and Alice underwent her cancer treatment with the support of 2 young adults who'd learned that family could be more complicated than blood or legal papers. When Alice died 18 months later, Rachel and Jamal were at her bedside. She'd lived long enough to see Rachel make Dean's List and Jamal get accepted to nursing school, long enough to establish the Philip Carlton Foundation, using the proceeds from her house sale to fund college scholarships for foster children. Her last words were, "Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I love them. Tell them Philip would be proud." At the funeral, Rachel spoke about second chances and the complexity of human love, about how sometimes the people who hurt us most are also the people who love us best, even when they don't know how to show it. The children Alice had abandoned at 5 and 8 grew up to become the adults who held her hand as she died. It wasn't the ending any of them had planned, but it was the ending they all needed. Complicated, painful, and ultimately healing. Because sometimes the bonds we break find a way to mend themselves into something stronger than what came before. Sometimes the people who hurt us are the same ones God uses to heal us. Grace isn't forgetting. It's choosing peace over pain. If you've come this far, thank you. I hope this story touched your heart. If it did, consider subscribing, and I'll